So now that we talked about shot placement, let's talk about other ethical considerations and factors that you should take into account to become an ethical hunter. So we already talked about shot placement. You want to give that deer the quickest death possible. You do not want to wound a deer. You do not want to make a deer suffer any more than it has to. The idea of a hunter going into the woods, in my eyes, and harvesting a deer is we go into the woods and that deer, up until the time where we shot it and killed it, lived a natural life to the best of its ability. Unharmed, unfettered, nothing happening from humans directly. Of course, there's many aspects of humans living on planet Earth that affects animals, but as far as that deer's life, it's just living a deer's life until the moment you harvest it. If you compare that to cattle or anything else that's raised on a farm and then slaughtered, I would say that deer probably had a much better life, but that's a matter of opinion. You want to respect the animal that you're hunting. You're not going out there to just kill deer. You're hunting and harvesting deer. Killing the deer is part of that process. After you've killed the deer, now you're in the process of taking that meat and getting it home in your freezer or giving it to other people who need it. Doing something that's actually right with that deer's body, I think, will go a long way. And keeping that in mind, there is no reason to hunt if you're just going to do it to kill animals. I'm going to say that one more time. There is no reason to hunt if you are just going to do it to kill animals. You should always follow the rules and regulations, laws, everything that's required. As you can see here, we have a beautiful deer standing right on posted private property. An unethical hunter may shoot this deer. That unethical hunter is called a poacher. They are felons. If you want to become a felon, if you want to poach deer and trespass on people's land to do so, I would say that you should not be deer hunting at all. Give it up. Go do something where you're not taking someone's life, or an animal's life, rather. Give it up. Go do something where you're not taking an animal's life and trespassing on people's land to do it. It's just not right for you. If you can't respect another person's property, another person's land, deer hunting is not something that you should be doing, because I have seen beautiful deer on a lot of private property, and I respect that as much as I possibly can. There is no reason for me to walk onto that private property, okay, unless I have permission, which I would recommend written permission from the landowner. If you have written permission from the landowner and you're following state and local and federal laws, I would say you're off to a great start. Make sure you have good shot placement. Practice a lot. I don't care if you're shooting with a weapon that's easy to shoot and you never miss. You should still practice a lot. Respect the wildlife that you encounter. Even though your aim is to harvest a deer, you should respect that deer. Follow your laws, follow your regulations, respect people's property. If someone does not want you on their property, do not go on their property. If you don't have permission to go on private property, just because there's not a posted sign doesn't mean you should go on that property. Always get permission. And think about, who you are as a person, that ethical framework that you grew up with, that moral framework that you grew up with, and try to be true to that person when you're out in the woods, respecting wildlife. All right, so let's talk about private versus public land and tips for hunting each one, assuming that you have permission to hunt on that private land, of course. So public land is going to be something that you're going to have to find out about on your own. You're going to have to do some research about that. I have a map actually sitting right here above my computer, and that's showing me some Corps of Engineer land that I pay each year for a permit to access. There's also some federal land that I also hunt on as well. Most of the land that I hunt on is land where other people are using. It is public land. I do hunt on private land, but the private land I hunt on ends about 300 yards that way. And yes, I have harvested deer in that small area, but most of my hunting is done on public land. So right here you can see this is an Iowa Habitat and Access Program. There's certain types of hunting and allowed, but this would be an example of a place you might choose to hunt. Another example of a place you might choose to hunt is your property. Let's say you own a few acres. Let's say you own 10, 20, 30 acres, and you want to try to get a deer on your own property. That could be another place you hunt. The strategies for hunting each of these places might be a little different. Public land, depending on where you're hunting, let's say it's a national forest, there is just so much space that maybe you'll never see another person. But if you are hunting somewhere where that's public, but it's not a lot of space, the odds you're going to run into another hunter is a lot higher. You're going to need to think about those interactions with other hunters, how you're going to de-escalate those situations. Most people are good people, but you do not want to be walking into another hunter's area ruining his hunt. And if you do, you should be prepared to get out of there and basically be as respectful as possible, knowing that you've likely spoiled that part of his hunt. The woods will calm back down and it'll be okay, but you don't generally want to get in there and ruin another person's hunt. If you choose to hunt public, that's the risk you are going to run. You could have a car drive by at any time. You could have a person walking through your area that you're hunting. There's a number of factors that that come into play. If you like competition, public land is probably a great place for you to go. If you just want to get the biggest buck possible, private land is probably the place where you should go. Because if you're hunting private land, that means hundreds or thousands of people aren't accessing that land. It's probably controlled. And if it's controlled, you might talk about a handful of hunters, depending on the size, hunting that area. As far as private land, like I said before, you need permission. If it's not your land, get permission. And the type of permission I would ask for is written permission. If you trust somebody's word, that's one thing, but written permission is something that you can go, oh, well, here you go, Mr. Game Warden, sir. This guy wrote me this note with his signature on it, and at least you have something to show for it. Okay, other aspects of private versus public hunting. In the area you're hunting public, you might have different regulations and different rules than you would on private. And I know that goes for where I live, but I would just take that into consideration before you go out and decide to hunt public. You know exactly what the rules are hunting that location, what weapons you're allowed to use, the bag limits, antler size, all that stuff needs to be taken into consideration. Another thing that you might run into when hunting on public land and dealing with other hunters is hearing calls. Something that I've run into a lot is hearing a lot of rattling. Definitely people making the noises because it doesn't sound natural and you just hear it all the time. That's something you're going to have to deal with. Could be scaring the deer off, could be bringing deer in for you. But you're going to have to deal with both aspects of that. You're going to need the correct licenses. You're also going to need, most likely, some sort of hunter education. Nowadays, you can do that online. I highly recommend doing your hunter education class now. Safety is paramount. You need to understand that with other hunters in the woods, and even without other hunters in the woods, there are so many factors you need to take into consideration. And the fact that while you're deer hunting, you're holding a weapon that has a power to take a life. You need to respect that power And you need to understand that power and understand how to be safe while holding that power in your hands. Every state, so like on this picture right here, I have the Montana Fish and Wildlife, or Fish, Wildlife and Parks, some licenses pulled up. Every state's going to have different hunting regulations, different licenses or permits, depending on how it is. Some states are going to require you to actually like tag the animal or put something on the animal. Some states are not. You're going to need to find out what your state requires. So typing in Google a search like Montana deer hunting regulations, Montana deer hunting permit requirements, stuff like that, that might get you started if you lived in Montana, of course. So you're going to need to make sure that you have the fees covered and your safety course done, and to keep that information with you. So you want to keep your license, your hunter safety card with you, your identification card. Just in case a game warden does come up to you, you want to be fully prepared and be like, okay, yeah, you want him to understand that you've gone through the steps to be prepared for him to approach you and ask you for the required licenses. Okay. Now, if a game warden comes up to you and you are saying, well, I don't really know, I think I left it in the truck, or I'm not really sure where it's at, but I know I bought it. I don't think that's going to help you as much as if you were to pull out a waterproof case of some sort or a plastic baggie with all of that information in there and say, here it is, it's all here. Even if you had to look through it, you have a baggie. You have something with a bunch of documents in there that's just specifically for if a representative of the law comes up to you and asks you about your hunting, you can prove that you're doing it legally and you're doing it the right way. There's really not much more to it. Understand your state laws, understand federal laws, understand the rules of where you're hunting, follow them, be an ethical hunter. Let's get into the next segment.